Welcome to the Let's Talk Growth podcast, where we focus on the topics that can help companies unlock their growth potential. Now here's your host, Bill Hupp.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Growth. Today, I'm joined by Mike Haldane, the founder and president of MarketWise Advising. Welcome back to the podcast, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
In today's episode, we're talking about the importance of doing market research before launching an as-a-service offering. So, Mike, let me start with this. Why is market research so important with an as-a-service offering?
Well, what I would say with as a service is that it tends to be a more complicated solution than simply selling a product or even a service. And the reason I say that is because it's complicated by the fact that it is oftentimes inclusive of not just the product or products. In many cases, it is a combination of products to make up the solution, but also the services. So there are probably going to be some upfront services, installation, configuration, training, and that sort of thing, as well as ongoing services to keep the solution up and running over time. And so because of the complication, there's just a lot to learn from the market about exactly what that needs to look like and how it should be presented to the customer by the go-to-market team.
Okay, and what topics are typically covered?
Well, generally speaking, it's a lot like any other new initiative that you might be wanting to introduce. So let's just say that you're talking about a new product. You're going to want to find out a lot of the same things that you want to find out with an as-a-service offering. So, for example, you'll want to understand the needs of the market. What are the challenges that the market faces as it relates to what you're thinking about bringing to market, and really understanding, what are their pain points? What keeps them up at night? Once we understand that, then we can start to introduce concepts of what a solution might look like, and then we can start to get feedback on that. So, we might say, okay, well, we heard what you said from the standpoint of what keeps you up at night, your challenges, the things that are kind of the hard parts of your day, if you will. Now let's talk about some potential solutions to that. We've got a few concepts that we want to test with you. And so let's do that. Let's get feedback on the way that we're thinking about this, the features that we're expecting to be able to offer, the price associated with that. And then we can start to talk about how we plan to talk about it. So from a messaging standpoint, how do we talk about this versus how we might talk about a product? And then of course, how do you want to have this delivered? Is this something that you would want the company to deliver and sell directly, or would you expect to buy something like this through a channel partner? And what might that look like from the standpoint of contracting and pricing and that sort of thing? So a variety of things on the front end with as a service, just like you would have with any other product. But what I found with as a service is that it is more complicated, and therefore there's the need to dive in a little bit deeper to some of the things that wind up being pretty nuanced once you get the product out there. And when I say that, I mean things like messaging. The way you talk about an as-a-service offering is pretty different from the way you talk about a product. So understanding some of that on the front end makes things a lot easier when you get to the point of execution, when you're writing content for websites and that sort of thing.
Generally speaking, how is that messaging different?
When you're talking about products, a lot of times you're talking about the problem, and then your solution is pretty focused on a particular product. So you start talking about problems, and then features that resolve those problems and the benefits of those features, and it's you kind of wind up with this matrix of problem, solution, benefit, and that's pretty cut and dry, and it's pretty straightforward. But when you're talking about an as a service offering, you're really talking about, okay, I'm going to make a big challenge for your organization go away with a solution, and the solution is going to include some products and some services, and we're going to deliver this in a way that is different from what you're used to. You're normally down the path with having to secure capital dollars to make capital purchases. Now what we're talking about is an operating expense, because we're providing a service that happens to include a lot of different components, but is delivered in the form of a service. So, the question becomes, how do you talk about that? How do you talk about it in a way that resonates? And then beyond that, you have to consider the fact that, whereas you might be used to talking with a particular champion within an organization, now you've got a number of stakeholders that are going to have a say into whether or not this as a service approach, is going to be right for their particular company. So we'll get into some of the details, I suspect, a little bit later in this conversation. But you're going to have stakeholders like directors of finance that you probably didn't have before, and so the messaging goes beyond just the product and starts to talk about the solution as a whole, including all of its elements. And then we break it down even further to talk about how this impacts the various departments within a given company, within a given customer.
As someone who's done this for a long time and started as a service offerings at several different companies, what are your preferred forms of market research to get the answers you're seeking?
Well, it starts with qualitative research. So, we talked, I think, a little bit about that a few episodes ago, but qualitative research, just by way of a reminder, is more discussion oriented. So these could be one-on-one interviews, or these could be set up in the form of a focus group, but you're trying to get direction at this stage. So when I talked earlier about the fact that we wanted to understand needs and challenges and what kept people up at night, the way you do that is with discussion. So it's not, this is not the time to be quantifying what we're hearing. This is the time to understand perspectives of a number of different people so that you can start to form an opinion of what a concept solution might look like, so that you can then come back and test that and get specific feedback on particular elements of that solution and that sort of thing. So once you have an idea of what the concept is going to look like and the direction that you want to take, then you might go back and say, okay, we're gonna put this concept together, and we are now ready to better understand who specifically it's going to be for. So you might say, okay, well, we interviewed during the qualitative phase a number of different folks from a number of different industries, but now we want to understand if we have a best shot or a better shot at particular industries versus others. So the next phase of quantitative might be that you want to ask questions to get a feel for how much they like your concept and what they have for expectations around pricing and how to message it and that sort of thing. And then, but do it in a number of different industries so that you can then later segment the data and determine which industries are going to be top priority versus ones that are maybe later priorities. So, in this case, you might send a survey out to hundreds of potential customers to try to get their feedback, and then you would know, okay, well, if I'm in the food industry, I'm going to want to look at that data. If I'm in the auto industry, I'm going to want to look at that data. If I'm in the the computer industry, I'm going to want to look at that data, and you're going to do comparisons between those three industries to try to figure out where you have the best shot at success. So that would be kind of the next level. So that's kind of the first level of quantitative, but the next level of research. And then beyond that, once you targeted in on the segment, the industry that you wanted to focus on first, then it would be a matter of understanding, okay, who within that industry am I going to want to be talking to, and what are their pain points? So again, you might be talking with a director of finance, you might be talking with a CEO, you might be talking with a manufacturing person. Could be a variety of different folks within the organization, but what you're wanting to know at this stage is who within the organization do I need to be talking with? Who's my network within the prospective customer? And then what do I say to them once I get there? And it's going to be different for the director of finance versus the manufacturing person versus the CEO. They're going to have different needs, and you're not going to want to just tell them about everything from a value proposition standpoint that the as a service offering brings. You're going to want to talk to them specifically about how it addresses their particular problem. So that's where the next level of quantitative research comes in. It's to identify those personas and know specifically what their pain points are so that you can address them with a very narrow, focused message to them that represents just their part of the overall solution.
And what insights can customers expect to gain from a market research project like this?
What you gain is, again, going back to qualitative and then first level quantitative and then second level quantitative, is you're going to gain a perspective on what the needs are, what the solution ought to be, how it should be priced, how it should be messaged, which industry specifically to target first, second, and third, and then who within those industries we should be talking with and what we should be saying when we're actually in front of them. So that gives you a very defined roadmap of where to go, who to talk to, what to say. And, along the way, we're also going to gather information about what the price should be and how to actually take it to market from the standpoint of direct or channel or what have you. So the answer in short form is to say that the research is going to direct and guide the strategy of what we're going to do with this as a service offering in terms of how we build it, how we market it, how we deploy it, how we support it, and all of those sorts of things.
And how should teams use the information collected from the market research conducted before launching an as a service offering?
Well, what I would say is that if the research is thorough and it's been done in a methodical way without bias and all those sorts of things, the information gained should be taken literally, and if it's taken literally, then it should be applied to the strategy. So it's to the extent that this is one of the initiatives in a growth strategy. All of that information should be taken to drive what that strategy actually looks like, and then beyond that, the marketing plan should be reflective of what was learned from the research. The pricing should be reflective of what was learned. The training provided to the organization, the sales team, for example, or the channel should be reflective of what was learned from the research. And of course, the product, right, from the standpoint of product management and how the solution is actually ultimately defined. So all of those things should be taken into consideration, and they should drive the strategy of the organization as it relates to this offering, and then the whole go-to-market operation from the standpoint of actually taking it to market and making the first sales.
Well, Mike, it seems like, as with anything, doing your due diligence is critical for companies to be successful in launching as a service offerings. Another fascinating discussion, and we look forward to talking to you again soon here on the podcast.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Let's Talk Growth. If you enjoyed it, feel free to rate and review the podcast. You can get new episodes and listen to old ones by visiting marketwiseadvising.com/podcasts. Let's Talk Growth is owned, produced, and published by MarketWise Advising, LLC.